It's the Locked On Flyers podcast for Friday, October 4th, your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that thinks the guys that want it really wanted it in a meaningless game.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say.
You're Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, and thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner. You can find me on Twitter at rmiriam. I'm here as always with Russ Cohen, who's on all your favorite social media apps at Sportsology. We as a show are on Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, and Twitter at Locked On Flyers as well. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit fanduel.com to get started. You can find us over on YouTube. We are also on the SiriusXM app or anywhere you listen to podcasts. Subscribe to get our latest episode as soon as it's available here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Russ, we will get into that Flyers Devils-ish game.
That's a good way to call it.
But I do think there is, like, now that it's over, I think there is definitely a point to it. But yeah, going into it, not so sure. That
Right.
being said,
I think that's true. I mean, I don't know what it was. It wasn't NHL hockey. I'm not sure what it was, but like guys were trying, but like
yeah,
some were trying too much. Some were doing like weird stuff. Like it was weird.
it was weird. Earlier in the day yesterday, the Flyers had their main group practice, and Noah Cates wasn't there because he played in the game. Same with Ule Lixell. So it felt a little surprising that they weren't there, but given that they were in the lineup, of course, it made sense. But looking at the lines from practice, again, I think now they're still just trying stuff, and we have like a week until the season starts, so things could change, obviously. But they put Michkov with Couturier and Konechny again on his offside. Don't love it.
I don't love it
It's
either.
just practice, though,
Right.
so
We can't draw conclusions from it.
we can't. Tippett went down with Frost and Forster on the second line. Luchenko did not play versus the Devils, which I thought was interesting. Center to line with Farabee and
Well, we should
Brink.
talk about that. Like we could do a whole show
Yeah,
on that. I've made my feeling clear. I like Jet Luchenko. I think he's a terrific player right now. He's on a good arc. Do I think he should play in the NHL? I don't. I know everybody's like, well, there's no harm in playing him. Well, there is harm that you could do. If he doesn't do well in any of those games, and they decide that, hey, Jet, we're gonna give you the 9 games, and after 2 he doesn't look good, then it might take him a couple weeks to recover in the OHL. I'd rather him go out on a high and not have to play in those games because again, you're playing against some of the better Western teams right out of the gate, and I just don't think it's good.
yeah. We'll get into it when we're doing our roster
Mhm,
predictions in the next segment. I'm
mhm.
sure, Russ, you're looking forward to that.
Yes.
But um, getting into this game against the Devils, Daryl Williams behind the bench again. So no torts, but I don't know. Like
But
it
again,
doesn't
he only
matter.
coached one. It does. Yeah, I think it does. He only coached one game in the preseason. One.
That is true. That is
He's the
true.
only coach in the league that coached one game in the preseason. I think there's something to be said about that. I
Yeah, I
just,
do think so. Like, uh, in the grand scheme, does it matter? Probably not, but I think in, a process perspective, he should have coached another game earlier in the preseason then.
correct.
If
When
he
it
knew he
mattered.
wasn't go Yeah, if he knew he wasn't gonna coach this one. In the meantime, the main line that we were looking at in this one was Noah Cates centering Ule Lixell and Anthony Richard, because obviously, like, Lixell has been at or near the top of people's lists, including what the coaches have been saying in terms of performance at camp. Cates has gotten called out. Richard is near the top of people's call up. options here and maybe still had an outside chance of making the lineup or making the roster, depending on, what the strategy was in terms of player types going into this season. And they certainly looked like they were trying real hard all game.
Yeah, no question. I mean, I think Lixell looked terrific. I think, Andre looked terrific. Richard looked good. I'll save it all for next segment, but I know what I would do. And it's not going to be a popular decision, but I know what I would do.
Yeah, I just think, you look at the goal scorers in that game, all three of them were on the scoreboard. And I think it was important for all of them. Noah Cates, especially, given that he was called out specifically by John Tortorella. So that was good for him. I think, Lixell's game I thought was better earlier in the game, and it kind of you know, trailed off a little bit later, but I think all three of them really look pretty solid. I was glad to see J.R. Avon get one after missing his first attempt at it. As just, a side note, but I do think that Emil Andre by far had the best game of anybody out there.
No question. Like, he was really, really good in all facets.
Yeah, I like both ends of the ice. I thought he
Yeah.
was getting back defensively effectively. I thought, his instincts were there. I thought he looked really good on the power play. I just felt like the entirety of his game and his skill set was on display.
Yeah,
And
no question about
and
that.
and if you're putting it all out there for one last shot at making the roster, like, he did literally everything he could do. And even if he doesn't make the roster, I don't think like he should hang his head at all. I think he has done like nearly everything he could do to make this team.
Yeah. I again, I can't comment because we're going to talk about it next segment, so I'm not going to comment.
The other interesting aspect of the game was goaltending, I would say, with Fedotov and Kolosov splitting the game. Absolutely bonkers to switch out goalies in the middle of a
I
penalty
know.
kill.
I
Like,
know.
that would never happen in the regular
No.
season unless there was an injury.
No. It doesn't happen in ever, really. Like, I can't remember the last time I've seen, unless it's like you said, it's an injury. Uh, I think I've come to grips with Fedotov that right now he does look like somewhere between a 1B and just a strict backup. And I think there's always going to be a couple goals a game where I'm like, you could have been set better for that, or you shouldn't have been sliding on that one. Maybe you should have played it differently. But then he seemingly closes the gap. So
Right.
I think that's what I'm getting used to with him.
Yeah, he feels like really loose out there,
Yes.
and he like goes a little far outside the net than you would maybe want him to.
Yeah.
And I just think that he is like not a safe goaltender. And I think that makes it a little nerve-wracking sometimes. But I think that you're right. Like, when it comes down to it, he can tighten things up.
Yeah.
And his size solves a lot of the problems there.
Yeah, and with Kolosov, like that first goal, he was screened on. Like the defenseman, I forget who it was right in his eyesight. Like you can't do that to a goalie.
No, and I think that, I don't think his game was as good as it was the first time
No,
around, but I don't think it was bad either. I think, just the same as the Flyers had a few guys that were trying everything to make the team. Devils had a few guys
yes,
like that
like Kevin
too.
LeBanc is a legit
Yeah,
NHLer. Like he just
yeah,
people were just like, all right, well, we're not going to pay him much because we only think he's got offense. We don't know how much, but I think so for him to be in this game, it's probably not right, but he was and
yeah,
he scored. So there you go.
yeah. I mean, that his game tonight was like, "Oh, you're not taking me to Europe? I'll show you."
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's that's exactly the game he had.
Yes.
So I think that you can maybe, give Kolosov a little bit of a break there,
I
but
am.
I think, now we just wait and see what
Yeah.
happens with
Right.
him.
I mean, again, just the weird nature of this team.
Weird things. And then of course we had like 3 fights
Of
because
course.
it was an AHL-ish game, and Hunter McDonald had to get one more fight in on an NHL surface. Sawyer Bolton was asking for it, so he got it. And
Yeah.
he did not go well for him in that first
No.
fight, so he had to try again, which was slightly better, but still not great.
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. I'm not gonna glorify the fighting. I just won't.
Yeah. Yeah. But overall, I think, the guys we wanted to see something from, we did.
Yeah.
And that was the important part of it. I think, Bonk got another game of experience, which is good. I think Gronz looked real solid.
Mhm.
Again, we talk about him as a dark horse for call
Yeah.
ups, and I think he's earned that to
Yeah,
move up the list a little bit.
I think
So
so.
I think, all in all, the preseason ended on a pretty solid note. With that, we have to determine what the actual roster is going to be when it gets turned in on Monday. And we are going to try and do that coming up next.
Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. I would take the Minnesota Vikings over the New York Jets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com.
On Monday's show, we will, of course, be doing our season preview. Check out the Metro division where we think the standings will end up. Look at the Flyers and say who we think the scoring leaders will be and all that fun stuff. So stay tuned for that. In the meantime, now we're done with the preseason and it's time to put a roster together to submit to the league. Now, obviously there's some guys that we know are going to be on there and we've, harped, we know what the questions are. We know what the spots are, that there's really one spot. There's 22 guys currently that have roster spots. And I just don't see a world in which any of those guys are not on the final list unless they're hurt. So that being said, does Tortorella and Danny Briere, do they just go with the 22 and pick none of these guys, or will they take an additional guy and have 23?
No, I think they'll take Emil Andre, but what I would do is also uh, replace Lixell for Brink. I would. I don't care who's on what side. I don't care what kind of things they've made. I think Lixell has had a better preseason, and I would argue anybody saying that Brink had a better preseason. Would you agree or disagree?
Well, we haven't gotten there in the conversation. I was just asking if we were going to
Well,
have
this is where I am.
22
That's where my
or
head's at.
23 people.
Fine.
But because I think that there is a question here because Nick Sealer was not at practice, right?
Right.
So if he's actually hurt, Emil Andre makes the roster, no question, in my opinion, because they need an additional defenseman,
Right.
right? If Nick Sealer is fine, that's where I have the question of is it Lixell or Andre? I don't know that they're gonna send Brink down. I just don't see a
Well, I
world
mean,
in which they
here's the
do it.
reality. Okay, it's not like Brink had a great season last year. I don't think he proved anything this preseason. Do you?
I mean, I don't know that he did necessarily, but I don't think he was bad enough that his establishment at the NHL level is at risk.
But what's his establishment? I mean, it wasn't like he had a great season. Like I think you could put Lixell in there, and he's going to do the same thing, with better numbers. I think he'll play the same role. And so, like,
I don't know though.
if this is just about because Brink was a second round pick, you can't operate that way. But I'm just saying, if this is a true reward system, Lixell's look better, and you can't say he's not a pro. He's had plenty of pro experience.
Well,
Like I
both
just would,
Brink and Ali Lixell are waivers eligible. So you have to put either one of them if you're going to send them down through waivers.
Yeah, I mean, you
I
can't send him
think
down. You could just scratch him and just have your scratch list be
so
longer.
that's different. So that's a
Well, I'm
completely
just saying he
different
replaces him in the
thing.
lineup. I'm not saying you send him down and lose him.
So
I'm
we're
just
talking
saying,
roster. We're just talking the
right. So
roster.
Lixell on
The
the roster,
23,
Brink not on the roster. And you could
but
put him
Brink
on the
would
scratch.
still be on the roster and he's scratched.
He's just scratched. Fine.
That's a completely different question
Well, I'm
than
not
does
saying
he
cut
make
the
the
guy.
23-man roster? Right. That's what I'm saying. Is like you don't
Okay.
cut
I
him.
misunderstood that. But no, I wouldn't cut him.
We're
But I would have.
talking about the list that gets submitted to the
Yeah,
league
I
on
know. I
Monday.
get that. But I would do it that way.
Yeah, setting up lines and setting up who plays and who doesn't, that's a whole different conversation. But I think that, you know, there's no way that they're going to put Brink through waivers. There's
No. And
absolutely
I'm not
no
saying
way.
they should.
So I think that given that there's still just one spot open. So it's either Andre if Sealer's hurt or Lixell. That's I think there's really no other way around it.
Well, there is another way. The other way would be you send Eric Johnson down for a week. If somebody takes him, fine. I mean, did you see the play he made where he ripped off the guy's helmet? What was that? Was that even hockey?
They're committed to Eric Johnson,
Okay,
so
but
I don't know
let's
what you're
no,
saying
but
here.
I'm saying, Rachel, what do you think, Eric? I don't care what the Flyers are committed to, and he's a good guy in the room, and I personally like him. But as a player, what does he really have to offer other than, yeah, he can, say some good things to guys in the locker room? We've seen this before with Flyers defensemen who are past it,
I don't
and they
disagree,
keep
but
him on
I'm
the
just being
roster.
realistic here because
Yeah,
he's
no,
the
but I'm
seventh
asking you not to be
defenseman.
realistic. I'm asking you to just tell me what you saw with his play on the ice. That's what I'm asking.
Oh, I don't think I would much rather have Emil Andre and somebody else,
That's all I'm
right?
saying. We don't have to. We don't run the team, but I'm just saying some of these things that they do and make these decisions. They're doing these out of like, well, we did a handshake. Remember the handshake agreement with Chuck Fletcher a few years ago? Like, it's just sometimes guys aren't worthy of the spot you give them, and sometimes you have to say, hey, look, we'll get you back up here, but right now these other guys have earned the spot. Like, you could do that, especially on a rebuilding team. You could do that.
Well, I mean, if we're gonna do that, I would rather do it with Delorier than Johnson.
Oh, of course, but that one they're not going to do because that's what Danny Briere has said, that one. But he
I
hasn't said
know.
like Eric Johnson's an untouchable. So I think, there's
Well,
room
that's
for,
fair. I don't think
yeah,
I've heard. I don't think
no.
I've heard that.
Delorier, we
But
know, is untouchable. We all would replace Nick Delorier at this point and let Brink and Lixell play, but that's not going to happen. And neither will the Johnson thing happen. But I'm just saying, based on what I see in his play, he doesn't deserve this automatic pass to be the extra guy.
no, I completely agree with you. But I'm just trying
Yeah,
to predict what they're going to
I
do.
know. I know.
So,
I
and
just wanted to add that extra caveat because I just feel like we should be able to talk about what we see, how they're doing, before we say what the Flyers are going to do, because that's different always.
yeah, oh, for sure. But and the Luchenko question is still out there too, right?
Yeah.
Because to me, I want Delorier gone, and
Right.
then you have Lixell there as the permanent extra forward, right?
Right.
And then you can throw Luchenko it if that's what they want to do, whether we disagree or agree
Right.
with it. If
Right.
that's what they want to do, they can have him as the extra forward for a few games
Right.
and then bring, Delorier back when that's done,
Right.
right? When his less than 10 games are done or whatever,
Yeah.
right? So in my world, that's the solution for the forwards is take them both.
Mm-hmm.
But I just don't think that's possible. So I think Lixow is probably going to get the shaft here,
He is.
and because they're going to take Luchenko. But I don't know. Maybe they really do just send Luchenko back, and that's the
I mean,
question.
I think they should. I don't see a
Yeah.
reason to put him out there. Um, if you want to say, like, usually the reasons you put that guy out there are, well, he's our best player in preseason, but he's not. Or he's so much better than, I don't know, and you name a guy, and okay, but
I mean,
he isn't.
it there
He's
is some logic there from a center depth perspective that he has established himself at the center role in a way that Scott Lawton can pick it up if he has to. They can put Noah Cates there if they have to, but Luchenko's better than both of them at center. And so it's easy to find the logic to do it. Just there's other logic that says you shouldn't. That's the problem.
right. I think that's the issue there. I'm just gonna say, and I got to look up their line combinations.
To me, it's that Luchenko didn't play in this game. To me, that's the tell.
No, I
Because
get that. I understand why people are jumping at that, but um, so as an example, let's say, so you're going to say put Luchenko if he plays. Let's say he were to play first game, so you're putting him at 3C.
Mhm.
Okay, so it'd be him against Teddy Bluger. I mean, Teddy Bluger's pretty wily center in this league, and to be honest, Canucks won't match it up 3-3. What the Canucks will do is they'll put him out against either JT Miller or Elias Pettersson
Yeah,
and
and he'll
and
get
make him
hosed.
right. And so I don't, if he was at home, I might have a different opinion of this, but they're not at home. They can't control that. That's
Right,
the
and
complication of it to me.
yeah,
He's
and
played
that's
well.
why
Don't get me wrong. He's
yeah,
played
and
well.
that's why I lean toward sending him back to the OHL. Their season has already started, so,
Right.
like, the longer they wait, the more difficult it'll be to integrate him back in and get him going, with his teammates and such. So, I think, like, to me, send him back
Yeah.
now. Like, just do it, but we'll see what they decide to do. The tell says that they won't. So I think that we're gonna see Luchenko on the roster, and we're only gonna see Andre if Sealer's hurt, and that is my
I
prediction.
think I don't disagree with your prediction. I think there's a good chance of that. And then my prediction is nothing's going to happen. None of those guys are going. That's the prediction I'm going to make. There you go.
All right, so we're sticking with 22.
Yep.
All right, we have our thoughts to end the week when we come back. So, in a roundabout way, we got to a final roster last
Right.
segment. But, that is like the biggest thing that's top of mind, right, for all of us
Yes.
in terms of how this week has gone. I think it's gone a lot differently than we would have liked given the quality of competition. I don't think we got as much information as we would have liked in
No.
order to make those decisions and make those predictions. I think that, you look at training camp and you're like, yeah, I'm sure the practices have gone how coach wants it to, and he's got a plan, and that's fine. But from a game perspective, I don't think that the Flyers team is prepped in the best way possible. But that's just my take on it.
No, I have to agree with it because I don't think they've gotten a chance to play out the scenarios they wanted to play out.
Yeah.
Like just that simple.
Yeah. And you know, that kind of leads me to the second thing is this too long between the end of preseason and the start of the regular season? For the Flyers, absolutely. I think it's been
Yes.
bad luck with this schedule. Not only did they have a terrible last preseason game because of the opponent and the scheduling, but then they don't start until a week later. There's some teams that have maybe 3-4 days in between.
Right.
That's a lot better schedule-wise. Now, it could be worse because they actually rescheduled that Tampa Preds preseason game for Monday night, and then the regular season starts Tuesday. Well, other than the global series, right?
Right.
But the regular season starts Tuesday. That's absolutely bonkers
That
to
is
me.
bonkers.
But,
But you can't lose revenue, Rachel.
nope, can't lose the revenue. But I think that, the one thing that is really good is that, they said the team was going to go to Vancouver early and kind of get set up, have some team bonding, and just get settled with the time change and
Well, that
get
means you're going to have to make
practices.
a quicker decision, though.
Well, the decision has to happen before Monday, so then they can leave for Vancouver on Tuesday,
Yeah,
like,
but they're
or
going to make it
Wednesday.
before Monday. I mean, yeah,
They
they're not
are,
going to.
but
They are.
that's the deadline.
I
So
know.
so, it could be okay in the grand scheme of things, but I worry about this week-long break a little bit before the regular season starts because you didn't have a good last preseason game that's everybody firing on all cylinders to kind of build from.
Yeah, it's not ideal. You would like the guys that you think are going to make the team, at least the majority, to play in that game. And then if you're ahead by a lot, you could sit a few of them. You'd like it to be that way. It didn't go that way. Um, they're going to play a tough Canucks team, and they'll be ready. Like they'll be excited for the season to start. But do I think the coaching staff has everything figured out about this team? No, I don't.
Yeah, and I think that's, a big part of it. It's tough to start on the road in a back-to-back situation, but I do think that when the Flyers have played these, Western teams to start the season, they've generally been pretty successful. I think the Flyers, as of late, they have beaten the Canucks, game one, game two of the season recently. I think it's been okay. I just think the circumstances feel different this time around in terms of the preparation, and we'll see. But I do worry a little bit. Just are they ready to go? Because to your point, they haven't practiced all those scenarios as much as I would have liked in game form.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
it
I'm going to
just,
sorry, I'm going to contradict myself from last segment because I wasn't really thinking about this part. I was just kind of like just talking off the cuff. Uh, since it's back to back, and if Nick Seal really is banged up, he's probably not playing back to back. How could you force him into that if he's already banged up? You're going to have him play back to back right away.
yeah,
So
it's
that's
tough.
another thing. Yeah.
So we'll see.
I
I'm
know
sure
he's
at some
been a
point
warrior. It's
today.
not about him. It's really
Mhm.
about, making sure it doesn't get any worse.
Yeah, I'm sure sometime today we'll get an update and maybe he's fine and it's a moot
Right. And if we
point.
get the update that it's all clear, then yeah, this part's moot.
But, we don't know that as of now. So, I think it's really a challenge for the Flyers this season to get going in a really effective way. I think the saving grace of the road trip is that they're kind of alone together,
Hmm.
and it's good for them to be just together without distractions to kind of focus on these early games. So I think it could turn out to be a good thing. Again, I just worry about it.
I mean, I'll just say this. I would feel better if I already knew, like, hey, Michkov had a set line. But as of
Mhm.
this discussion, he doesn't.
Right. Right. I think that's, a big question. Just from the line we presented earlier in the show about what they
Hmm.
did in practice yesterday. And if they're still trying to tinker with that, that's not a great
Because it's better for him to
thing.
know, or, it's not that, look, he's
Yeah.
pretty adaptable. He can play. But
Yeah.
again, if
Of
you're going to
course.
play in your, but my issue is playing on the offside or not.
Right.
That's the issue. He doesn't know what it's like to play in his offside in a real NHL game. He doesn't.
Yeah. I would absolutely put him on the right in his first game. Like,
Absolutely.
no question. No question. And in fact, at least for like 10, 12 games before I even think about putting him on his offside
Yeah.
for a game.
Same with
That
me.
is that is what I would do. But yeah, so I think that, this week we got some clarity in terms of given certain scenarios who should make the team. I think, we still have some questions as to the strategy of the roster. We have some questions as to if this team is ready to go, but there's a lot of good here too. Excited to see Michkov play in the regular season.
Hmm.
Excited for a lot of opportunity here, and next week we're gonna hit the ground running.
Yeah, I think, to start the season, they have more call up options than they did last year. But
Yeah,
A lot of times John limits those call-up options and keeps going with the same guys. And so, like last year, what Belpedio got the most of them, right, for defense
I think
until
so.
near the end, and then he
Yeah.
gave Yinning and Adder their shot for a little while. So, like, I think they're in better shape that way, but then it's up to the coach as to who he sees being able to be called up. So, like, if Andre does get the shaft now, he definitely is first on the call up list. Now, if for some reason he isn't, and then all of a sudden they say, hey, it's because we needed this kind of defenseman, well, don't expect a great soundbite from me for that one because I'm not going to be happy about it because I feel he's earned it.
Yeah, I think that Tortorella has gotten more exposure to these guys, which is good, and he remembers more of them now, which
Yeah.
is a good thing too.
Yeah.
So maybe he'll expand that kind of field of vision in terms of
Yeah.
who he'll want for call ups. Um, that'll do it for today's show. We'll be back on Monday. We're going to look at the Metro standings, look at Flyers team leaders as we start to preview the regular season. Plus, we'll have our nemesis of the week. As a reminder, we always want to hear from you. Send in those mailbag questions on Twitter at Locked On Flyers. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail or comment over on YouTube. I'm Rachel. I'm on Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology, SPORTSOLOGY.
Thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen. Now go check out Locked On NHL, where local experts keep you updated daily on all the biggest storylines ahead of the season. Find Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you get to your podcasts. Have a great day, everyone.